Hare Krishna. This morning we will continue with the study of the Uddhava Gita, chapter 13. The Hamsa Avatar answers the questions of the sons of Brahma. And last session we ended up at text 6, so we'll read text 6 again. Omajnana timrandasya chinanslakya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shigurave namah. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namo. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pacharani Nirvishesha Srinyavadi Paskachayata Satarani. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'll be reading translation again of text 6. Until one revives one's direct knowledge of the spirit soul and drives away the illusory identification with the material body and mind caused by the three modes of nature, one must cultivate those things in the mode of goodness. By increasing the mode of goodness, one automatically can understand and practice religious principles, and by such practice, a transcendental knowledge is awakened. That in the purport, we find many details how to cultivate the mode of goodness. So unless one is liberated from the influence of the modes, one must cultivate things in the mode of goodness. And that means, first, study religious scriptures that teach detachment from mental speculation and material sense gratification. So one should accept pure water for quenching thirst and cleaning the body. Associate with persons who are cultivating detachment from the material world. So sadhu sangha, associate with devotees. One should live in a solitary place where devotional service is practiced and discussed among Vaishnavas. So that's a solitary place, is being with Vaishnavas and discussing topics about Krishna and devotional service. One should rise by 4 o'clock in the morning and utilize the auspicious Brahma Muhurta to advance in Krishna consciousness. Execute one's prescribed duties and follow the regulative principles of spiritual life. Utilize all one's energy for pious purposes. Time should not be wasted in frivolous or materialistic activities. So, utilize all one's energy for pious purposes. Means purposes in agreement with devotional service. Most pious purpose is to distribute Krishna consciousness. The time should not be wasted in frivolous and materialistic activities. Prabhupada would become angry if he saw old men playing with balls or using their time in sense gratification. Accepting second initiation from a bona fide spiritual master. Learn to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. It's an art to be learned. Not easy to chant Hare Krishna mantra with the proper inner attitude. One should meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the enjoyer of all sacrifices. so that everything is in this world is meant for the enjoyment of the Supreme Lord. One should meditate on the lives of great devotees and saintly persons. We have so many acharyas. Remember my Guru Maharishi gave many lectures on each of the previous acharyas, going through their lives. Very attractive. One should not meditate on lusty women and envious men. Follow the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Purificatory rituals should be performed to purify the spirit soul and not to bring down material blessings on one's material household. Thus, knowledge increases, one is able to understand the eternal soul and the Supreme Soul, Lord Krishna. Thus, the soul becomes free from the artificial imposition of the gross and subtle material bodies caused by the material nature. Spiritual knowledge burns to ashes the material designations that cover the living entity, and one's real eternal life begins. So, a lot of advice how to cultivate the mode of goodness. We will also read Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comment. One should use sattvika items. One should read scriptures emphasizing detachment from the world rather than scriptures which recommend goals in rajas, tamas. One should use holy water rather than water mixed with fragrances or liquor. One should associate with persons who are detached, not persons with bad conduct. One should live in a solitary place, not places with roads and gamblings. Roads and gambling. Roads, interesting. One should do activities at Brahma Muhurta, not at evening and midnight. One should perform daily and periodic ties, not rites for enjoyment or cursing. One should give birth to progeny according to proper diksha rites, not to rites of worshippers, of devatas, etc. One should meditate on the Lord, jnanis, and followers of Dharma, not on persons who are full of hatred or enjoy their senses. One should use mantras like Om, not inferior concocted mantras. One should employ samskaras for purification of Atma, not for purification of body, house, or slaughterhouse. Dharma increases by sattva. From Dharma comes jnana. How long does one do this? One does this until one realizes Atma, until one destroys the gross and subtle bodies and their causes, the gunas. So the jnana of vidya, having destroyed the coverings of the jiva, like a fire without fuel, finally disappears. That's quite a deep purport that each of these items is a topic for meditation. And in reflection, how does it reflect to our own life? That, do I live with devotees? That do I hear sufficient from the scriptures to develop detachment? That what's the quality of my chanting Hare Krishna mantra? That so there are many any good advices how to go to goodness. But now we have an analogy, text 7. Enu sangarsayo vanir, taktva samyati tatvanam, evam guna vyatyayo, dea samyati tatkaya. In a bamboo forest, the wind sometimes rubs the bamboo stalks together, and such friction generates a blazing fire that consumes the very source of its birth, the bamboo forest. Thus the fire is automatically calmed by its own action. Similarly, by the competition and interaction of material modes of nature, the subtle and gross bodies are generated. If one uses mind and body to cultivate knowledge, then such enlightenment destroys the influence of the modes of nature that generate the body. Thus, like fire, the body and mind are pacified by their own actions in destroying the source of their birth. So that is the analogy. The term guna vyatya indicates that the body is generated by the unstable relationship of the three modes of nature. So there's constant strife amongst the modes of nature. The variety of material modes gives hope to the conditioned souls that by changing their material situation, their unhappiness and frustration can be turned into happiness and satisfaction. But even if one acquires relative material happiness, there will soon be that will soon be disturbed by the inevitable slough of the material modes, the inevitable flux of the material modes. Now we have a purport of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. The term guna vyatyaya indicates that the body is generated by the competition of the three modes of material nature, which exist everywhere in constantly changing proportions. As fire produced by the friction of bamboo sticks burns a forest, and then become distinguished the gross and subtle bodies, which are generated by the interaction of the modes of material nature, become pacified when the influence of the modes of nature is destroyed. Now, from verse 8 till verse 11, we will hear about how the modes binds one. So that is Shri Uddhava Uvacha Vedanta Mahtya Paina Vishayam Padamapadam Tatapi Bunchate Krishna Tatkatam Svakarachavat. Shri Uddhava said, my dear Krishna, generally human beings know that material life brings great future and happiness, and still they try to enjoy material life. My dear Lord, how can one in knowledge act just like a dog or an ass or a goat? So this is a cruel question. How can an educated human being commit to such a condemned way of life wherein the result is practically the same as the animals? So if by cultivating the modes of goodness, one's life is filled with happiness, enlightenment, and future rewards, why should anyone cultivate the mode of passion and ignorance? That is Uddhava's question. We will hear the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Those who do not know, they enjoy material life. But even those who know that one can attain the ultimate goal by employing sattva still enjoy material life. They enjoy just as a dog scolded eats leftovers, just as a donkey, dog kicked, enjoys a female donkey, and just as the goat, now about to be killed, enjoys the grass. That's a heavy statement. Now text 9 to 10. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Uddhava, a person bereft of intelligence first falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind. And when such false knowledge arises within one's consciousness, material passion, the cause of great suffering, pervades the mind, which by nature is situated in goodness. Then the mind, contaminated by passion, becomes absorbed in making and changing many plans for material advancement. Thus, by constantly thinking of the modes of material nature, a foolish person is afflicted by unbearable material desires. So the process which one helplessly bound in illusion and is clearly described here. That's also this purpose of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. It summarizes everything very clearly. So I read the purport of this verse. The word sankalpa sa vikalpaka in this verse indicate that the materialistic people are constantly making plans in the hopes of attaining happiness and avoiding suffering. Any sane person must admit that in spite of all such plans, material life is simply full of miseries. The mind is a creation of the modes of goodness, and thus it is not meant for absorption in attempts to fulfill the animalistic propensities which are impelled by the lower modes of passion and ignorance. So mind is created by the interaction of the three modes and false ego, by the interaction of goodness. Mind was created, and here the mind is a creation of the mode of goodness, and thus it is meant for absorption attempts to fulfill the animalistic propensities. Yes. Text 11. We will read now up to verse 21, and then there is more discussion. We will hear more about the modes first. So text 11 is about controlling the senses. One who fails to control the senses, 11. One who does not control the material senses comes under the control of material desires and is thus bewildered by the strong waves of the mode of passion. Such a person executes immaterial activities, although clearly seeing that the results will be future unhappiness. So unless we engage the mind in devotional service, it's uncontrolled. It's controlled by the material nature. And then this is what happens. That to Vishvanasravati. Then in order to attain the object of desire, the person knowing that the actions will produce karma in the form of suffering, performs actions. Text 12. Although the intelligence of a learned person may be bewildered by the modes of passion and ignorance, he should again carefully bring the mind under control by clearly seeing the contamination of the modes of nature He does not become attached. Vishwanath. Even though the learned person may become overcome in his intelligence by rajas and tamas, he should again bring the mind under control. So many times we make the experience that the mind overcomes the intelligence, but then because the mind is absorbed in rajas and tamas. But we have to bring the mind again under control by engaging in the devotional service. Bhaktivedanta says, right? Although a learned person's mind may become disturbed because of its nature of accepting and rejecting the things of this world, because he knows that he will incur sin if he indulges in acts of passion and ignorance, he does not allow himself to be deviated from religious life. For devotees, that means the rules and regulations of devotional service. And the practice, of course, of the different limbs. A person 13. A person should be attentive and grave and never lazy or morose. Mastering the yoga procedures of breathing and sitting properly, one should practice fixing the mind on me at dawn, noon, and sunset. Those are the times we are chanting Gayatri. And thus, surely the mind should be completely absorbed in me. This is the yoga process here that Vishwanath, the words atandrita, being careful or alert, from the previous verse is explained. Where should the mind be engaged? It should be engaged in me. If the mind is not under control, one should not give up efforts. So, Bhaktivedanta says, those who are trying to absorb their minds in thought of the Supreme Lord should give up all desires for enjoying the objects of the external world. They should remain enthusiastically engaged in the service of the Lord while practicing asanas, pranayama, and so on. Verse 14. The actual yoga system as taught by my devotees, headed by Sanat Kumar, is simply this: having withdrawn the mind from all other objects, one should directly and appropriately absorb in me. So that's the purpose of yoga, that which was taught by Sanat Kumar. So these 4 Kumaras, they were embodiments of process of liberation. They were Sankhya, Yoga, Vairagya, Tapasya. And here's about yoga. The word yata indicates that, like Uddhava, one should hear directly from Lord Krishna, who is bona fide representative, and directly fix the mind, Krishna. Text 15. She would have said, my dear Keshav, at what time and in what form did you instruct the science of yoga to Sanak and his brothers? I now desire to know about these things. Text 16. The Supreme Personality of God said, once the mental sons of Brahma, namely the sages headed by Sanak, inquired from their father, from Brahma, about the difficult subject matter of the supreme goal of yoga. So, Aikantikim Katim means the highest limit or goal. 17. The sages headed by Sanak said, O Lord, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly, the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cause over the activities of sense gratification, destroy this mutual relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to us. Short purport. As described above, as long as one is conditioned, a conditioned soul, the modes of material nature manifest in the form of sense objects constantly disturb the mind. By their harassment, one is deprived of actual perfection of life. So if we are not thinking of Krishna, we think about things of this world. And that thinking of this world is thinking of sense objects in the world. Everything in this world, subtle or gross. And that's detrimental. That drags us down. And but how to give up this meditation or all these subject matters, this sense perception come all into our mind? How can we stop that? That's the question. That so consciousness enters into sense objects because of natural attraction. The experienced objects enter into the consciousness, comes into your mind. How can a person desiring to surpass the sense object completely give up this mutual relation? You cannot give it up. It's a difficult matter. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. An intelligent person must understand that as long as he remains conditioned by material nature, the modes of nature will constantly be disturb him with the enticement for sense gratification. If one falls victim to such allurements, the perfection of life will remain unachieved. Having that we experience all this. So that's also a question for all of us. So the Supreme Personality of God has said, my dear Uddhava, Brahma himself, who is born directly from the body of the Lord, and who is the creator of all living entities within the material world, being the best of demigods, seriously contemplated the question of his sons headed by Sana. The intelligence of Brahma, however, was affected by his own activities of creation, and thus he could not discover the essential answer to this question. So Brahma, with his foreheads, with all his intelligence, he could not answer this question. That means nobody can answer this question by speculation. That it requires transcendental enlightenment. If Brahma could not do it, how could we do it? That commentary is a purport here. So, good. Can someone read this purport, please? 18.
Srila Jiva Goswami has quoted 3 verses from the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as follows. In the 9th chapter, verse 32, Lord Krishna blessed Brahma with realized knowledge of the Lord's actual form, qualities, and activities. In the 9th chapter, verse 37, the Lord ordered Brahma to rigidly carry out the Lord's injunctions and affirmed that Brahma would thus never be bewildered in his cosmic decision-making. In the 6th chapter, verse 34, Lord Brahma assured his son Narada, "O Narada, because I have caught hold of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, with great zeal, whatever I say has never proved to have been false, nor is the progress of my mind ever deterred, nor are my senses ever degraded by temporary attachment to matter." Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Please continue. In the present verse.
In the present verse, in this 13th chapter of the 11th canto, Lord Krishna states that Brahma unfortunately did become bewildered by his creative functions, thus providing a grave lesson to all of the Lord's empowered representatives. Although one may be elevated to an exalted position in the Lord's transcendental service, at any moment there is danger of false pride polluting one's devotional mentality.
interesting that yes, Vishwanath's commentary. Yeah. Thou Brahma was the head of the Devatas, not born from any mortal, Swayambhu, and the creator of all beings. And though he considered the question deeply, he could not understand the nature of the pure Atma, because his intelligence was attached to the action of creation. So there was still some material tinge in his consciousness, and therefore he could not understand the nature of the pure Atma. Now, we go further. Lord Brahma desired to attain the answer on the question, and that was puzzling him. And as he fixed his mind on me, the Supreme Lord, at that time in my form of Hamsa, I became visible to Lord Brahma. So here's Hamsa avatar appears. That Hamsa means swan. And the specific ability of the swan is to separate a mixture of milk and water, extracting the rich milky portion. Similarly, Lord Krishna appeared as Hamsa, or the swan, in order to separate the pure consciousness of Lord Brahma from the modes of material nature. And to separate the pure consciousness of Brahma from the modes of nature. It's interesting. This is 19, Vishwanath. Just as a swan can separate milk from water, I can separate the consciousness from the goodness. This is implied by the word swan. The Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, being unable to answer the question of Sanak, Brahma began to meditate on the Supreme Lord. At that time, the Lord assumed the form of Hamsa, appeared before Brahma. Brahma then inquired from Hamsa about his identity. Text 20. Thus seeing the sages placing Brahma in the lead, came forward and worshipped my lotus feet. That then they frankly asked me, "Who are you?" That was the question they asked. Who are you? That is quite a direct confrontation. Who are you? So we will read that this is 20, yeah. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati comments, when Brahma was unable to answer the question placed by the sages, he fixed his mind in thought of the Supreme Lord. The Lord then assumed the form of Hamsa and appeared before Lord Brahma and the sages, who proceeded to inquire about the specific identity of the Lord. Who are you? That text 21. Now it becomes interesting. My dear Uddhava, the sages being eager to understand the ultimate truth of the yoga system, thus inquired for me. Now please hear as I explain that which I spoke unto the sages. So, Vishwanath Sarvati Thakur, Aham Tebya can mean I, the master, Ibya, of the sages with false identity of I, Ahamrita. According to Amarikosha, the word Ibya means master. So this is 21. Now 22. My dear Brahmins, if when asking me who I am, you believe that I am also Jiva soul, and that there is no ultimate difference between us, since all souls are ultimately one, without individuality, then how is your question possible or appropriate? Ultimately, what is the real situation or resting place, both of yourself and me? So Hamsa saw a flaw in their question. We will read first the purport, or I will go over it, but in terms of essential points. So the asraya, or the real resting place, our actual resting place or shelter. So what is our ultimate nature, our constitutional position? So by inquiring about the shelter or resting place, the Lord is indicating the eternal constitutional position of the living entity. If the living entity and Krishna would be equal, then there would be no deep purpose in one living entity inquiring and another answering. Only one who is in a superior position can meaningfully answer the question. That now Lord Krishna's actual purpose is to explain the ultimate perfection of yoga here, which the sages were desiring to know. If one becomes fixed in transcendental knowledge, the mutual attraction between the material mind and the material sense of objects automatically ceases. That this is the answer. That one sentence and the whole thing. I repeat it. If one becomes fixed in transcendental knowledge, the mutual attraction between the material mind and the material sense objects automatically ceases. If you see Krishna in your mind, there is no trace of material nature. You fix your mind on Krishna. That's the purpose of yoga. So the spiritual mind is not attracted to material objects of gratification, and thus by spiritualizing the mind, material existence automatically slackens. So there's commentary. We will read his commentary, and then here also the commentary of Vishwanath and Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, because this is going very deep. Someone can start reading the purport, please.
Ashya means resting place or shelter. Lord Krishna's question, that is our actual resting place or shelter, means what is our ultimate nature or constitutional position. This is because no one can come to rest or be satisfied unless one is in one's own natural position. The example is given that one may travel all over the world, but ultimately one becomes satisfied by returning to one's own home. Similarly, a crying child is satisfied when embraced by his own mother. By inquiring about the shelter or resting place of himself and the Brahmanas, the Lord is indicating the eternal constitutional position of every living entity.
Yeah.
If Lord Krishna were also in the Jiva category, and if all living entities, including him, were thus equal, and there would be no deep purpose in one living entity inquiring there would be no deep purpose in one living entity inquiring and another answering. Only one who is in a superior position can meaningfully answer important questions. It may be argued that the bona fide spiritual master answers all the questions of the disciple, and yet the guru is in the jiva category. The answer is that the bona fide spiritual master speaks not only on his own behalf, but as a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is in the Vishnu category. The so-called guru speaking on his own behalf as a jiva soul is useless and is unable to meaningfully answer serious questions. Thus, the sage's question, Ko Bhavan, who are you, indicates that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternally an individual person. Because the sages, headed by the Lord Brahma, offered obeisances and worshipped the Lord, it is understood that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Brahma, the first created being in the universe, could not accept any other living entity except the Lord as worshipable.
Yeah.
Lord Krishna's actual position is to explain the ultimate perfection of yoga, which the sages were desiring to know. If one becomes fixed in transcendental knowledge, the mutual attraction between the material mind and the material sense objects automatically ceases. The spiritual mind is not attracted to material objects of gratification. And thus, by spiritualizing the mind, material existence automatically slackens. By questioning the propriety of the sage's question, the Lord is assuming the position of the spiritual master and preparing to give valuable instructions. One should never be envious of a bona fide spiritual master, especially if, as in the case of Lord Hamsa, speaking to the sages headed by Brahma and Sanak Kumara, the Guru is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself.
Thank you, Vishwanath. In asking who are you, do you think I'm a jiva? Or do you think I'm a material body? Or do you think I'm the Supreme Lord? First, Hamsa dismisses the idea that he's a jiva. If you ask if I'm a jiva arising from the absolute substance, how can your question arise at all? There exists no plurality of the absolute truth into many atmas, since the absolute has no distinction based on qualities and species, and all conscious particles are actually one. Who is the shelter of me, the person answering you? How should I answer? I would give an answer. So I'm so and so, based on particular qualities and species, which would be contrary to your belief in one absolute. Oh, text. Yeah. Yes. It's a bit paroksavad, indirect speech is using here, that Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj on text 32, yeah. If there is no difference between the Supreme Lord and living entities, then there is also oneness of the person who is questioning and the person who is answering. Who would ask a question and to whom? The actual purpose of Lord Hamsa's statements is that the spirit soul and the super soul are separate identities. Text 23. If by asking me, who are you, you are referring to the material body, then I must point out that all material body are constituted of 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Thus, you should have asked, who are you 5? If you consider that all material bodies are ultimately one, being constituted essentially of the same elements, then your question is still meaningless, since there would be no deep purpose in distinguishing one body from another. Thus, it appears that in asking my identity, you are merely speaking words without any real meaning or purpose. So in this verse, why is he saying that? The Lord refutes here the false identification with the material body. So we will read the purport of Vishwanath. He discards the idea that he is the body. In considering the absolute substance, the question cannot arise, who are you? Based on the idea of many bodies made of 5 material elements, directed to one person, you would have to say, who are you 5? Well, we consider that the 5 elements merge into one form. the question, who are you, still cannot be asked, because the oneness of all elements, as with the oneness of all jiva, there can be no distinctions of elements in one person and another person. But even the learned use this convention in questions and answers. You have also said, O Brahmins, my use of the words is also meaningless. My words arising only in response to your question are meaningless, like your question, because they should not occur. We are speaking only like you, but you are ignorant. Why are you asking about the truth? Are you not ashamed? It's quite interesting. Text 23, commentary by Bhaktivedanta. The absolute truth is one. A living entity's material body, which is made of the 5 gross elements, is different from other material bodies. The sages had already seen their father worship the lotus feet of the Lord, and so there was no need for their question. That's Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. He makes it very simple. So this 24. Within this world, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes, or senses, it is me alone, and nothing besides me. All of you, please understand this by straightforward analysis of the facts. That within the world, whatever is perceived by mind, speech, eyes, or senses, is me alone, nothing else. He says, Hamsa says that you have a problem with seeing sense objects, but whatever is perceived, it's me. That's what you are seeing. That's interesting. In this verse, the Lord refutes the conception that he is the supreme God, far beyond and different from everything within this world. The Lord explains that since everything is the expansion of his potency, he is not different from anything. Nothing can exist separately from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus everything shares in the Lord's nature. Although some manifestations are superior and others inferior. So the Lord is testing the stages by pointing out various contradictions in their questions. So now we are going back to the original question. 25. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects. And similarly, the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. I'm going to read this again. These are very essential points made here. And it's not easy for dull minds to penetrate these truths. That's the reality. I read it once again. So, my dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects. And similarly, the sense objects enter into this mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. So the Lord says, this mind and these senses, we have nothing to do with it. That the problem is you identify with the mind and the sense objects because you are identifying with the body. But it's nothing to do with the soul. That the soul is transcendental. That if you go to Bhagavad Gita, this verse in the 13th chapter, that's a verse which is difficult to explain because it's the same subject matter. That yeah. 1333. Yatasavagatam swakshmyat akasano pralipyate savatra vastitude tatatmano pralipyate. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it's all-pervading. Similarly, the soul situated in Brahman vision does not mix with the body that are situated in that body. The body means body and mind and absorption in the sense objects. But the soul is situated in Brahman. We should become absorbed in Parabrahman, not in the body, not in the sense objects of this world. And that will spiritualize the mind. But we will hear here now. So this is the original question. The senses and this interaction about the senses and the sense objects. How can we cut this? The answer is you cannot cut it. That it's not possible. They are intrinsically connected. It's not possible. But you are not a mind and not the sense objects. So you should not absorb in the sense objects. And that or seeing sense objects separate from me. Because then this becomes coverings. Because these are coverings, it's not reality. So the Lord is preparing to teach the sages perfect spiritual knowledge. This after rejecting two false concepts of life. The first false concept is that all living entities are equal in all respects. And the second false concept is that a living entity is identical with its outward or subtle body. So the first concept, there's a difference between the spirit soul, which is part and parcel, and the Supreme Lord. It's not all the same. And that the living entity is identical with its outward or subtle body. That's the second false concept. We are not a body, we are not a mind, we are not this mind absorbed in sense objects. So then, the Lord answers the questions of the sages. My dear sons, it is a fact that the mind enters into the material sense objects, into the mind. Thus, although the living entity is actually part and parcel of me, being as I'm also eternally conscious, and although the internal form of the living entity is spiritual, in conditioned life, the living entity artificially imposes upon himself the mind and sense objects. So in conditioned life, the living entity artificially imposes upon himself the mind and sense objects. How can you possibly endeavor to prevent such material attraction? Since both the material mind and objects are useless, they both should be completely given up, and thus automatically you will be free from all material duality. So the mind makes errors to see objects as being for our sense enjoyment. But we are not a mind. We should bring the mind under control by our intelligence. And by intelligence, we can see the soul and that we are Dasuham, servant of Krishna. So at the end of the purport is a commentary of Sridhar Swami here, the last. Can someone read this? Sridhar Swami points out.
Can I read, Maharaj?
Yes, please.
Srila
Sridhar Swami points out that the symptom of the material mind is the tendency to consider oneself to be the ultimate doer and enjoyer. Naturally, one with such a puffed up mentality is helplessly attracted by the sense objects. One who considers himself to be the doer and enjoyer will be irresistibly attracted to the means for attaining sense gratification and false prestige, namely exploitation of material objects. Above the material mind, however, is intelligence, which can perceive the existence of the eternal spirit soul. It is not possible to separate the material mind from the sense objects because they naturally exist together. Therefore, by intelligence, one must realize one's eternal form as spirit soul, part and parcel of the Lord, and completely reject the bogus material mentality. One who
When you revives,
automatically detached from material attraction. Therefore, one should cultivate knowledge of the falsity of sense gratification. When the mind or senses are attracted to material enjoyment, the superior intelligence must immediately detect such illusion. In this way, one should purify one's mentality. By devotional service to the Lord, such detachment and intelligence automatically awaken, and by full understanding of one's original spiritual form, one is properly situated in eternal consciousness.
yeah, that's the material disease we absorb in the mind, and we experience happiness and distress, and we are thrown from one side to another by this happiness and distress. And we take the mind so serious, and by that we are suffering. But factually, it's not nothing serious. The soul is not affected. So one who revives his original spiritual mentality becomes automatically detached from material material attraction. Therefore, one should cultivate knowledge of the falsity of sense gratification as the first thing to do. And the second thing to do is, when the mind or senses are attracted to material enjoyment, the superior intelligence must immediately detect such illusion. In this way, one will purify one's mentality. So by devotional service to the Lord, such attachment and intelligence automatically awakens, and by full understanding of one's original spiritual form. So one is properly situated in eternal consciousness. So this was text 25, commentary by Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. The conditioned living entity in the material worlds are under the control of the three modes of material nature, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being eternally liberated, is transcendental to the three modes of nature. Material sense objects enter into the mind of the conditioned living entities, and their minds run after material sense objects. Yes, that is the madness of all the conditioned souls. We try to cure ourselves from that, which is not an easy job. 26. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me, realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and its objects. So this is the realization of one who has realized his position as a servant of Krishna. Giving up both the material mind and its objects. Why is it difficult to separate the material mind from its objects? Because the material mind considers itself to be the doer and enjoyer of everything. So giving up the material mind does not mean giving up all mental activities. It means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. Purifying the mind, not giving up all mental activities. So without surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, mere renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. Just as the sun's rays are part of the sun, the living entity are part of the Supreme Personality of God. When the living entity is completely absorbed in his identity as a part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of God, he becomes utterly wise and easily gives up the material mind and sense objects. So we have the last paragraph here. And this text 26. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. The word matrupa in this verse indicates absorption of the mind in the form, qualities, pastimes, and associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immersed in such ecstatic meditation. One should render devotional service to the Lord, and this will automatically drive out the influence of sense gratification. By himself, the living entity does not have the potency to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense objects, but by worshipping the Lord in a mood of being his eternal part and parcel servant, one is infused with the Lord's potency, which easily drives out the darkness of ignorance. So, Vishwanath's report. Giving them both up is difficult. The consciousness remains in the sense objects by impressions made firm by repeatedly serving the sense objects without a beginning. So that's going on since time immemorial. And these impressions are of previous lives, of millions of lives. They are still in our subconsciousness. So how will it be possible for you to give up the sense objects? The sense objects repeatedly remain in the consciousness by impressions. They remain there all the times. How is it possible to give up such consciousness? However, it is not necessary for jnanis to endure such difficulty in giving up both. The jnani who absorbs himself in me gives up both, because the devotee is fixed on service to me as a highest goal, become absorbed in my form, qualities, pastimes, and rasa, the sense objects not really from the consciousness. It is not difficult to give them up, but the jnanis do not desire to absorb their minds in me. So Bhaktivedanta Maharaj on 26. While residing in this material world, one engages in the service of the three modes of material nature. It is the modes of nature that capture one's mind. Therefore, one should come to understand how the individual soul and the super soul are both fully transcendental to the three modes of nature. So, yes, this is 26. 27. Waking, sleeping, and deep sleep are the three functions of the intelligence and are caused by the modes of material nature. The living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from the three states, and thus remains as a witness to them. So we remain a witness, practically. The mind, the three modes, it's like a film. And we are different from this film, nothing to do with it. But because of our attachment, we are identifying with the happiness and distress going into this mind. So, can someone read the purport, please?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Please go.
The spirit soul, this text 27.
Yeah, the spirit soul actually has nothing to do.
The spirit soul actually has nothing to do with the material world, having no permanent or natural relationship with it. Real renunciation means to give up the illusory identification with matter in its subtle and gross forms. Sushuptam, or deep sleep, indicates sleeping without any dreams or conscious activity. These three states are described by Lord Krishna as follows: Sattvajat Jagranam Vidya, Rajasa Swapnam Adishe, Prasvapam Tamasa Jantos, Turiyam Trishu Sanata Shantata. One should know that wakefulness is born mode of goodness, dreams from the mode of passion, and deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. The fourth element, pure consciousness, is different from these three and pervades them. Real freedom means sakshitvena, or to exist as a witness to the functions of illusion. Such an advantageous position is achieved by development of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, for conditioned souls who are not in Krishna consciousness, it's not possible to take this position as an observer. They will identify with the mind. Like 270 says in Bhagavad Gita, apoyamanam achlapavistam. So as rivers are going to the ocean is not affected by it. So the devotee sees material desires popping up in his mind, and he's not disturbed by it. He is a witness. He looks at the desire and says, oh, that's a material desire. That will cause me suffering. I'm not interested. And then the desire disappears. So that's witness. So we need to come to the fourth level of consciousness. Fourth level of consciousness. That awakening, that the dreaming state, the svapna, jagrati, svapna, susupti, deep sleep, and then turiya. Turiya is a transcendental state. And in that state, we become a witness. And we see how we are dreaming. We need to give up our misconceptions. That is the point made here. 27. That 27, purport by Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. I will first read this. The three states of the living entity: wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep, which are the functions of the intelligence, are born from material bodies of goodness, passion, and ignorance respectively. The liberated living entity is above from these three states and is not under the control of the three modes of material nature. So yes, Ramakrishna Prabhu, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I wanted to understand from this particular sloka 11:25:20, wherein it is referred that the last consciousness, that is Turiya Trishu Shantata, and it's in the translation it says that it is different from these three and pervades them. So is there any element of Turiyam present in the wakefulness, sleep, as well as deep sleep? How does it actually otherwise pervade?
Our consciousness comes from the spirit soul. Consciousness is there in all these states. The same consciousness, but it is contaminated. And the contamination in a awake state is, well, hopefully goodness, mostly not. When we sleep, it's passion. And deep sleep, that's interesting. It's called ignorance, but what happens in deep sleep is so subtle. Consciousness is still there in deep sleep. Because when you wake up, you say, I had a good rest. So there is perception. But in deep sleep, the consciousness is withdrawn into the soul itself. And there but then it's withdrawn into the soul. But then there are no thoughts, nothing, unless you are Krishna conscious. If it's withdrawn in the soul and you are Krishna conscious, you are still conscious of Krishna. Therefore, the 6 Goswamis, they were sleeping 2 hours a night, but still they were still Krishna conscious in their sleep. They were liberated persons. So that is consciousness. But that happens only when our consciousness is pure, not connected anymore with the modes. And that situation is called Jivan Mukta. Jivan Mukta. That's one is still a gross body, but the subtle body has been spiritualized. It's not there anymore. It's not there anymore. It's gone. But it's spiritualized. So then, when you leave your body, there is no subtle body that can create new bodies. So you go to the spiritual world. And in that state, one is free from all suffering. That is Jivan Mukta. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Maharaj. So to understand or summarize it, you're referring that identification with the gross body in terms of those 3 modes, which results in contamination. And whereas the 4th stage is there is no such identification, and therefore there is liberation.
Yeah, so when we are awake, there's usually identification with the gross body. When we are sleeping and dreaming, there's no awareness of the gross body, but awareness of the subtle body. In Sutsupti, there is only awareness of the spirit soul. And in Turiya, there is awareness of spirit soul and Krishna, which means everything. But, yes. Good.
Maharaj, in this case, then, even though if it is Sushupti, which is referred to as a deep sleep from the mode of ignorance, how is the consciousness of the soul still remains there? Because normally in the mode of ignorance, we consider the body is all in all.
Yeah, so that requires an explanation. Because in deep sleep, the consciousness of the soul is withdrawn from the subtle body and the gross body and is in itself. It's in the Brahman position. We could say it's the happiness of Brahman realization, peace. But the Brahman realization gives a great happiness, which we don't experience in Sushupti. And why? Because we are still covered. The soul is still covered by the subtle and the gross body with all these misconceptions. Therefore, we don't experience this great Brahman happiness, but we experience peace. Does that help to understand?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Good. Yes, Srinivas, Gopal.
Maharaj, in the 3rd canto or 4th canto, we learned that we get the dreams. Dreams we are getting means our last life or this life, what we did, our karma phala is coming in the form of dream. And that time they dream of Krishna or dream of the devotees. If somebody sees that, it is transcendental. And here it is said that dreaming means it is passion, mode of passion.
Yeah, mostly dreams are in a mode of passion. Sometimes we have transcendental dreams when the spiritual master appears in our dream or Krishna appears. That may be possible. That's exceptional. But mostly,
Oh, that is not out of passion.
no, that's transcendental. But that's exceptional mercy of the Lord. That these are not the usual svapna. That is the mode of passion. Mostly passionate dreams are horrible. But Krishna is so kind for his devotees. Instead, because our karma comes to the gross subtle and the gross body. And sometimes he gives our karma during the subtle, during the dreams. And we get a bad dream. That or we have material desires and Krishna fulfills it in the dream. That these things for devotees sometimes Krishna does these things, but for conditioned souls, it's all ignorance. That the passion and ignorance, the dreams. That's mostly like that. It's very exceptional you have such a dream. But I got one dream when I started to chant 16 rounds. That's in the beginning. I made a vow to chant 16 rounds, and then I got a dream, and Prabhupada appeared in my dream with, he was sitting on a Vyasa with many devotees around. And he was sitting up a Vyasa, an ashram, and he had a stack of booklets in his hands. And he took one booklet, looked at me in the dream and said, "This is your passport for the spiritual world." And then I accepted the passport, and then he raised his finger and said, "And now you have to work on your visa." So you have and that's what we are trying to do. But that's the only time I got ever a spiritual dream. That otherwise, it's all Maya, ignorance.
Maharaj, one more question.
Yeah.
That a person is sleeping, very deep sleep for 4 hours, 4.5 hours, and that person is getting up early in the morning and he is engaged in Krishna consciousness. So, but what do you say, after these chanting and all that, again, he has to go for preaching and material activities, may not be able to maintain that pureness. At what stage they are in?
Yeah. What do you mean with
You were saying about the Jivan Mukta.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Jivan Mukta, 2 hours they sleep.
Yeah.
And they will be in the deep sleep, in ignorance?
No, they are thinking of
Okay.
Krishna. They are with Krishna on the spiritual level. They are not in deep ignorance.
But deep sleep is possible only in that state, right?
Deep sleep is different.
Okay.
Susupti or deep sleep is the state, because when we are awake, then after some time we need to go to sleep, we need rest, right? And then we sleep, and when we dream, still the subtle body is active, passionately. But the subtle body needs also rest. Needs rest. So we need a deep sleep to rejuvenate. Okay? If you don't have deep sleep and you get up in the morning, you don't feel rested. You had a bad night. So we need a deep sleep. So when you enter that deep sleep, then the subtle body is resting. And the soul is connected with the super soul and in a state of peace. It's only conscious of itself. It's not conscious of the subtle body or the gross body. And then the subtle body is resting, and the subtle body gets energy from the super soul. And we need that energy. And when we have a deep sleep, then we are rested in the morning. So we need that deep sleep. But one who is on the spiritual platform and his spiritual body is completely purified, there is no subtle body anymore. And the subtle body does not need rest. Anyway, I hope you get the point a bit. This is important to understand. But devotees, my Guru Maharaj Bhakti Maharaj said, for devotees, no problem. They can sleep everywhere. Because we are so deeply engaged in devotional service, then we are so tired, we are going practically directly to deep sleep. Because if you sleep too long, then you come in the svapna, the sleeping state, the dreaming state. And that's a dangerous state, because the mind can do every wild things. Therefore, when I met Vishnu Goswami, the old Goswami from Gujarat, 35 years ago, he said to me that when you wake up in the morning, immediately get on your feet, out of bed immediately. Because if you remain lying in bed, then you're going to the dreaming state, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's too much passion that I don't have to make a picture to show a picture of that. I think everyone has that experience. Does that help? That okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So we will now have a break. Let's see what the time is at your side. It's 8 to 5. Let's resume at 10 past 5. 10 past 5. So we have 17 minutes break. We will resume, continue, and finish this chapter today, if Krishna willing. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Video बंद कर दो.
Hare Krishna. So we resume our study of the chapter on Hamsa Avatar, answering the questions of answering the questions of the sons of Brahman. Text 28. Yari samstri bandhu yam atmana guna vittida maito yestito jayat Jagastat Gunashitasam. 27. The spirit soul is trapped in the bondage of material intelligence, which awards him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. But I'm the fourth stage of consciousness, beyond wakefulness, dreaming and sleep and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind. So that is the practical solution. Being situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. With a short purport. Lord Krishna now specifically answers the questions that the sages originally placed before Lord Brahma. Ultimately, the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material sense objects and the modes of nature. But because of one's false identification with the material body, the modes of nature are empowered to engage one in illusory occupations. By destroying this false identification with matter, the soul gives up the illusory occupations awarded by the modes of nature. It is clearly stated in this verse that the living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion, but must state himself in Krishna consciousness, in full awareness of the Supreme Lord. So because of one's false identification with the material body, the modes of nature are empowered to engage us in illusory occupations. So it's clearly stated in this verse that the living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion, but must situate himself in Krishna consciousness in full awareness of the Supreme Lord. We are not conditioned, not liberated. We are not the mind. We cannot free ourselves only by knowledge. We need to surrender to the Lord. And that is 28. That purport by Bhaktivedanta Saraswati is being enticed by material sense objects, one falls into the bondage of material existence. In its constitutional position, the spirit soul is transcendental to the three modes of nature. And when he separates himself from the influence of these modes by becoming devoted to the Supreme Lord, he can be freed from all desires for material enjoyment. Text 29. So, the false ego of the living entity places him in bondage and awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness. Text 29. Yeah. So there is a comment here by Sridhar Swami. Can someone read the purport, please?
Yes, Mother.
Sridhar Swami comments as follows.
How does material existence cause the bondage of living entity? And how can such bondage be given up? The Lord explains this here by the word ahankara kritam. Because of false ego, one is bound up in network of illusion. Artha viparyayam indicates that although the living entity desires blissful life, eternity, and knowledge, he adopts procedures that actually cover over his eternal blissful nature and give him exactly the opposite result. The living entity does not want death and suffering, but these are actually the results of material existence, which is therefore useless for all practical purposes. An intelligent person should contemplate the unhappiness of material life and thus become situated in transcendental Lord. The word sansara chintam can be understood as follows. Sansara or material existence indicates material intelligence because material existence only occurs because of living entities' false intellectual identification with the material world. Because of this misidentification, one becomes overwhelmed with sansara chintam, anxiety to enjoy the material world. One should become situated in the Lord and give up such useless anxiety.
The material intelligence only occurs because of the living entity's false intellectual identification with the material world. Text 30. According to my instructions, one should fix the mind on me alone. If, however, one continues to see many different values and goals in life, rather than seeing everything within me, then, although apparently awake, one is actually dreaming due to incomplete knowledge, just as one may dream that one has wakened from a dream. So one who is not Krishna conscious cannot understand that everything is resting within Lord Krishna. And it is impossible for him to retire from sense gratification. 31. So those states of existence that are conceived of as separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no factual existence, although they create a sense of separation from the absolute truth, just as the seer of a dream imagines many different activities and rewards. Similarly, because of the sense of an existence separate from the Lord's existence, the living entity falsely performs fruitive activities, thinking them to be the cause of future rewards and destination. So we will read this purport first. Someone can read Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
Can I read, Maharaj?
Yes, please.
Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments as follows. Although Lord Krishna in his form of Hamsa Avatara has condemned the intelligence that sees duality and separate values within the material world, the Vedas themselves institute the system of Varnashrama Dharma by which the entire human society is divided into different castes, occupations, and spiritual statuses. Therefore, how can the Lord recommend that one give up one's faith in this Vedic system? The answer is given in the verse as follows. The words Anyesham Bhavanam or of the other states of existence refer to the innumerable divisions of all identification with the material body, mind, occupation, and so on. Such identification is illusion, and the material divisions of Varnashrama system are certainly based on this illusion. The Vedic literatures promise heavenly rewards such as residence in upper planetary system and prescribe the means to acquire such rewards. However, both the rewards and the means for achieving them are ultimately illusion. Since this world is the Lord's creation, one cannot deny that its existence is also real. Yet, the living entity who identifies the creations of this world as belonging to himself is certainly in illusion. The example may be given that the horns are real and the rabbits are real. But if one imagines the rabbit's horn, that is certainly illusion. Though a rabbit's horn may occur in dream. Similarly, the living entity dreams of a permanent relationship within the material world. One may dream that one is feasting on sumptuous sweet rice prepared with milk and sugar, but there is no actual nutrition value in the dream of royal feasting. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur remarks in this regard that just as one soon forgets the experience of a dream after awakening, similarly a liberated soul in Krishna consciousness does not see anything substantial in even the most exalted rivers offered by the Vedas, such as promotion to the heavenly planets. Therefore, Lord Krishna advised Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita to remain fixed in self-realization without being deviated by fruitive rituals performed in the name of religion.
Thank you. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, we can read his commentary directly here. How can one reject persons whose mind think in terms of variety in the forms of varnashram recommended in the Vedas? Because of the false condition of those who identify with the body differences such as varnashram created by body identity result like svarga and actions arise. These are illusory for the jiva. Though identity with the body, just like svarga and actions to produce them, actually exist as a result of the material energy, the jiva's relation to them is false. Though a horn exists, because the relation of a horn and a rabbit is false, a rabbit's horn is false. The seer of a dream, the jiva, sees false things in a dream, and actions dreamed, such as eating sweet rice, making sweet rice, or gathering the rice and milk to make it, are all false. So what is said here is that, yes, we dream at night, and the subtle body is active. The intelligence and the mind creates a whole thing. It's just illusory. That, but when we wake up, we think this is just a dream. But when we are awake, so-called awake, the state of being awake is also a dream. A dream that starts with birth and acts and starts with leaving the body. And between it's all a dream because it's temporary, like in the dream. It's of the same quality. So, like we eat, we prepare sweet rice, and then we taste the sweet rice. The tasting, the experience is an experience in the mind. So when we dream eating sleep rice, eating sweet rice in a dream, it's the same experience as awake. So by that we can help to understand the awakened state or the sleeping state. It's our bodily conceptions. They are both illusory. It's temporary, and the soul has nothing to do with it. Ramakrishna, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, in this case, then, right now, that the kind of studies that we are doing, we have not yet come to the state of, at least myself, in a highly evolved Krishna consciousness. Should I consider this also to be a dream, or this is different from the dream?
We are learning on the transcendental platform about the dream of the material world. That because this is the way, because yes, the material life, the awakened state, is a dream in the sense that it's temporary, but it's real. Dream modes are real. But our association with the three modes, that's not real. So this transcendental knowledge is real, but it remains in the modes for us unless we start to realize it by devotional service. Then it becomes Vijnana. Then we can transcend it. Then when we transcend it. So that is the point. So what we are doing is very important now. We are becoming awake, enlightened. We get up from the material dream. We start to see what's going on. And then when we see what's going on, yes, now we have to act according to that knowledge. And that's the challenge. Because it's nice to hear and this knowledge, and yes, I'm waking up, I see that's what's happening. But after the class, we forget all about it. Unless we work on it, realizing that we are going straight back into the illusion, because Krishna is not there anymore. But this knowledge is spoken directly by Krishna. That's directly connected. But yes, this verse says here Partly this verse explains the second Srimad Bhagavatam Sattva Shloki. Eteritam yat pratyata na pratyata satma dat vityatma nomayam yatabaso yatatma. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, it has no reality. No, it is as my illusory energy, that reflection, which appears to be in darkness. In that time. But now, the next step for us is to cultivate our intelligence and get knowledge and attachment. That if through knowledge, realized knowledge is equal to detachment. But that knowledge is only realized through devotional service. There's a point made in the next verse. Mother Imago.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm wondering what is extraordinarily special that Brahma couldn't answer his sons directly. Somehow the beginning of the chapter gave some image in my head like, oh, this is something that even Brahma doesn't know. But then the answer is something that has come repeatedly in Bhagavatam, about nature of mind or performance of devotional service being superior. So I'm wondering why Brahma was going into that state that he had to invoke the Lord.
That was explained in the purport before. It said that Brahma was still materially affected by engaging in the activities of creation. So he was affected by the modes, and therefore he could not answer this question. But Brahma has special position, so he started to meditate on the Supreme Lord for help. And then the Lord appeared as Hamsa, that as reciprocation of Brahma's prayer. But yes, if we are materially affected, we cannot understand his knowledge. Therefore, I'm saying that it's very difficult to understand. Very difficult to understand. We must hear it repeatedly and pray to Krishna to understand it. That if we think we have understood it, we are not. We are just fools. That is what we are. That it requires humility. I remember always the words of Bhujam Prabhu. Someone asked him, are you self-realized? And he said, yes, I'm self-realized. I realized I'm the greatest fool. So that's a good step, a good realization to start understanding this knowledge. But yeah, we are now in text 32. While awake, the living entity enjoys with all of his senses the fleeting characteristics of the material body and mind. While dreaming, he enjoys similar experience within the mind. And in the deep dreamless sleep, all such experience merged into ignorance. By remembering and contemplating the succession of wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep, the living entity can understand that he is one throughout the three stages of consciousness and is transcendental. Thus, he becomes the Lord of the senses. So this is a way to cultivate your intelligence, to get knowledge and attachment. The living entity is actually the Lord of the senses and the mind. That is 32. Yeah, is the Lord. The living entity is actually the Lord of the senses and the mind, although temporarily he has become a victim of their influence. a victim of the influence of the mind intelligence. So by Krishna consciousness, one may resume one's rightful position as master of mental and sensory faculties. Since the living entity can remember his experience in these three stages of consciousness, he is ultimately the experience agent or the seer of all phases of consciousness. He has been the observer of all these phases. So this universal experience can be understood by everyone, and thus everyone can understand that one's actual identity is separate from the material body and the mind. So text 33. So you should consider how, by the influence of my illusory energy, these three states of the mind caused by the modes of ignorance have been artificially imagined to exist in me. Having definitely ascertained the truth of the soul, you should utilize the sharpened sword of knowledge acquired by logical reflection and from the instruction of sages and Vedic literature to completely cut off the false ego, which is the breeding ground of all doubts. All of you should then worship me, who I'm situated within the heart. So the point is here, cut the false ego and worship Krishna. Krishna is the breeding ground. The false ego is the breeding ground of all doubts. By devotional service, all doubts are removed. And how are they removed? How are they removed? We heard in the beginning of the 11th canto how they are removed. That 11 to 42, Bhakti Prashana Bhava Virakta Anyatya Shesa Trikaika Kala. Papatya Manasya Tasnata Syutusti Pustiksu Tapayo Nugasam. Devotion, direct experience of the Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously whilst taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we get detachment from other things by direct experience from the Lord. So that's really where the detachment comes from. Devotion, direct experience, detachment is three occur simultaneously. 34. One should see that the material world is a distinct illusion appearing in the mind, because material objects have an extremely flickering existence and are here today and gone tomorrow. They can be compared to the streaking red line created by whirling a fire stick. The spirit soul by nature exists in the single state of pure consciousness. However, in this world, he appears in many forms and stages of existence. The modes of nature divide the soul's consciousness into normal wakefulness, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. All such varieties of perception, however, are actually Maya and exist only like a dream. So illusory consciousness, wakefulness, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. That so we can read here the purport. Someone can read the purport. It's not long.
The Lord now describes an additional process for transcending the illusory interaction of the material mind and material sense objects. Lasa means jumping or dancing, and thus manaso vilasam here indicates that the material mind is jumping superficially from one conception of life to another. Our original consciousness, however, is one, Vijnanam Ekam. Therefore, one should carefully study the flickering here, today, gone tomorrow.
Hmm.
Nature of the material world and detach oneself from the illusory variety of Maya. After realizing, shall I read, Maharaj?
No, that's Vishwanath. I will read the purport of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj now. Thank you. The three states of wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep, which are born from the three modes of material nature, are actually illusory and are only temporary manifestations. In the philosophy of the Mayavadis, these temporary manifestations are addressed as false. This understanding is false, however, because these manifestations are not false, but temporary. Until the living entity appreciates the sublime nature of the eternal spiritual pastimes of the supremely conscious person and the minutely conscious person, his heart will remain enraptured by the mundane duality of material enjoyment and attachment. When the remembrance of Krishna's pastimes is awakened in the heart of a living entity, his propensity for enjoyment or renunciation is destroyed, and his propensity for eternal service to the Supreme Lord is awakened. So when the remembrance of Krishna's pastimes is awakened in the heart of a living entity, his propensity for enjoyment or renunciation is destroyed, and his propensity for eternal service to the Supreme Lord is awakened. So that's the solution, that remembrance of Krishna's pastime must be awakened. And now we are coming to the practice of meditation by the Sankhya Yogi. 35. Having understood the temporary illusory nature of material things, and thus having pulled one's vision away from illusion, one should remain without material desires. By experience the happiness of the soul, one should give up material speaking and activities. If sometimes one must observe with the material world, one should remember that it is not the ultimate reality, and therefore one has given it up. By such constant remembrance up till the time of death, one will not again fall into the illusion. So remain without material desires. First, remember that the world is not the ultimate reality and therefore must be given up. So by constant remembrance up till the time of death, one will not again fall into illusion. So the purport is, so one will not fall into illusion if one constant remembers that it is not the ultimate reality. So don't take your mind so serious. Second, by enjoying spiritual bliss within oneself. And three, by retire from material activities of the mind, speech, of body. Retire from material activities from the mind, speech, and body. That's the practice of the Sankhya Yoga. Very difficult. It's easier when Krishna is in the picture. So in the Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj, I think it's here. And someone read this paragraph. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj comments.
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments as follows. The living entity, while living in the external energy of the Lord, should give up any anxiety for sense gratification and should not act for his personal enjoyment. Rather, one should search out spiritual bliss through devotional service to the Supreme Lord. By reviving one's relationship with Lord Krishna, one will understand that if one accepts any material object for one's personal enjoyment, attachment will inevitably develop, and thus one will be bewildered by illusion. By gradually developing one's spiritual body, one will no longer desire to enjoy anything within the spiritual world.
Thank you. So the point Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj makes here is one should search out spiritual bliss through devotional service to the Lord. And then by healthy developing one's spiritual body, one will no longer desire to enjoy anything within the material world. And then become 16, the analogy of the drunken man. Just as a drunken man does not notice if he's wearing his coat or shirt, similarly, one who is perfect in self-realization and who has thus achieved his eternal identity does not notice whether the temporary body is sitting or standing. Indeed, if by God's will the body is finished, or if by God's will he obtains a new body, a self-realized soul does not notice, just as a drunken man does not notice the situation of his outward dress. So a self-realized soul is unaware of his outward dress. You remember the example of the arrow maker, was so fixed on making the arrow straight that he did not see past the king and all his entourage. So if you are so fixed on Krishna, you become unaware that of our outward dress, because we are acting as a spirit soul, and we are because if we look that Srila Prabhupada says many times, the spiritual senses are there, but they are covered. They are covered by a subtle body and a gross body. The gross body is shown on the subtle body. So if we have this hand, we see the gross hand, but beyond the gross hand is a subtle hand. And beyond the subtle hand, our spiritual hand and arm. The spiritual senses are there and they become revived. When the spiritual, when we act in Krishna consciousness, we use factually the spiritual body. And that becomes manifest again. And we forget about the covering. That, so yes, a Krishna conscious person has achieved his spiritual identity, and he does not accept sense gratification as the sole goal of life. He's constantly engaged in the service of the Lord and knows that the temporal body and flickering mind are material. By superior intelligence in Krishna consciousness, he remains engaged in Lord's service. The liberated soul does not, however, inflict punishment on the body, but rather remains neutral, naturally accepting his destiny as the will of the Lord. That a liberated soul has already achieved his spiritual body and therefore knows that his continuous existence does not depend on the material body. I repeat this again. A liberated soul has already achieved his spiritual body and therefore knows that his continued existence does not depend on the material body. We have the commentary of Vishwanath. 2 verses describe the state of a person who has perfected Jnana, who is Jivan Mukta. He does not pay attention when he has risen from a seat or sits down again, because he has attained realization of Brahman, Svarupa. An example is given: a drunken person is not aware if he's wearing or not wearing clothing. Text 37. The material body certainly moves under the control of the supreme destiny and therefore must continue to live along with the senses and vital air as long as one's karma is in effect. A self-realized soul, however, who is awakened to the absolute reality and who is thus highly situated in the perfect states of yoga, will never again surrender to the material body and its manifold manifestations, knowing it to be just like a body visualized in a dream. So a perfect yogi will never surrender to the material body. One should patiently wait until the chain of one's previous fruitive work has completely exhausted itself, and at that time the body will automatically die according to its destiny. One who is highly elevated in Krishna consciousness never again surrenders to the illusory identification with the material body, which is just like the body in a dream. 38. My dear Brahmins, I have now explained to you the confidential knowledge of Sankhya, by which one philosophically distinguishes matter from spirit, and of Ashtanga Yoga, by which one links up with the Supreme. Please understand that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, and that I have appeared before you, desiring to explain your actual religious duty. The Lord reveals his identity in order that they gain faith. So, Sankhya means distinguishing Atma and non-Atma. Yoga means Ashtanga Yoga. I've come with a desire to teach Dharma. I should be understood that Hamsa also taught about Varnashram duty Dharma. This teaching is referred to later in speaking about the duties of Varnashram. O Lord Almighty Armed One, previously in your form as Hamsa, you spoke to Brahma those Dharma that bring supreme happiness to the practitioner. 39. O best of the Brahmins, please know that I am the supreme shelter of the yoga system, analytical, philosophical, virtuous action, truthful religious principles, power, beauty, fame, and self-control. 40. That all superior transcendental qualities, such as being beyond the modes of nature, detached, the well-wisher, the most dear, the supersoul, equally situated everywhere, and free from material entanglement, all such qualities, free from the transformation of material qualities, find their shelter and worshipable object in me. That's 40. I will read the purport of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj from 40. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, do not come to a conclusion of impersonalism, because it is sometimes stated that I am devoid of qualities. I possess all transcendental qualities. I am situated beyond the modes of nature. I am the best well-wisher of my devotees. I am the shelter of all. I am the ultimate goal of everyone. Transcendental qualities such as equanimity and freedom from bad association are eternally present in me. I cannot be understood by those who are in the body concept of life. And then also Vishwanath. So can someone read the purport of Vishwanath? When you say that you are the supreme shelter?
When you say that you are the supreme shelter of power and fame, we see that you also show identification with the body. How have you taught us knowledge by doing that? True, I do not have a material body different from myself, as the jiva has. It has no ahankara made of prakriti. It arises from my swarupa and is full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. This is explained in this verse. All qualities take shelter of me, who am beyond the gunas of Maya. I am not dependent on the qualities of Maya, nirapeksham, but I work for the benefit of my devotees, since I am controlled by their prema, priyam, and show affection for them. According to E. Gupadanya Priya Kriya Ka, Panini 13135, Priya means one who pleases. What are the qualities? I am equal to all since I am indifferent to material things, and I am attached, asanga, to my devotees who are spiritual entities. The word Adi indicates the ultimate unlimited qualities such as truthfulness and cleanliness, which are mentioned in the first canto by the earth personified. Sridhara Swami says that Aguna means that Lord has a form whose qualities do not change. Those qualities are eternal. In the first canto, it is said, in the Lord reside the following eternal great qualities, which do not disappear at any time. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:16-31. Thus, the qualities arising from the Lord's Swarupa belong to the Swarupa or the Lord, Atmanam. Shruti says, Shakti Vividhaiva Shriyate Swabhakti Bhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. The Lord has many spiritual energies, such as the energy of Jnana, Bala, and Kriya.
Thank you.
Shvetashvatara Upanishad.
Thank you. Lord Krishna continued, my dear Uddhava, thus all of the doubts of the sages headed by Sanak were destroyed by my words, fully worshipping me with transcendental love and devotion. They chanted my glories with excellent hymns. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, those who are attached for material enjoyment, those who are detached from material enjoyment have no doubts whatsoever. The sages headed by Sanak attained the transcendental platform and offered prayers and worship to the Lord. So the 42 last. The greatest of sages headed by Sanak Rishi thus perfectly worshipped and glorified me. And as Lord Brahma looked on, I returned to my abode. So the substance and foundational relationship with everything is Krishna. So this is the 13th chapter. Any question? Any comments? Not. And we will continue tomorrow. We will continue tomorrow with the 14th chapter. Lord Krishna explains the yoga system to Sri Uddhava. Yes, Nadia Biari.
Yes, Maharaj, in the 6th canto, I think we have the 4 Kumaras meet Lord Vishnu and they see the Tulasi on his feet and become the devotees. So this particular episode, when they meet Hamsavatar, is before that one, because this is more from a Gnana platform? Or how do we understand the timing?
Yeah, the Srimad Bhagavatam does not mention things in chronological order, but it could be before or it could be after. It could be before also because now they have heard about devotional service. There are embodiments of processes for self-realization in personal processes for entering Brahman, like Sankhya Yoga and Tapas and Vairagya. But now they understood the factorial goal is devotional service, and they have seen Hamsa. So they will be eager now to go to Vaikuntha and see Lord Narayan again. That's one possibility, but it's not in chronological order. So I cannot answer your question with certainty. Good.
Yes, Maharaj, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Jai Prabhupada.